After we took off New York, I woke up and we were landing in
Jerusalem. Just come back and you'll see it.
You know what this is?
Oh, I'm going to take care of Yeah, an airplane. You know, you shouldn't be able to sleep on an airplane. Because the vibration of the engine well, it's the time zone. Oh, I'm working on it. Oh, really? Yeah, I got to go for more than you got a couple here. Okay, good. Thank you.
It was like, I really am like customer service. It just was a chance I had your number. But I felt so bad because I was just like, I was like so upset. Well, I mean, it seemed like where it was very precise. I know, I said, like this contract that was someone who said to me from the cell, it was in
but that's not what you hate on that. So it's just, so I guess the one part is that they have got a specialist
All right. Let's see.
So yeah, just sit down and then. Okay.
All right.
pot is this big, and the flour is up to here. Okay, I will.
I was having to get things myself, and I wasn't in it. But it didn't matter
So I think our house was
good Yontif. And Gemar Chatzimah Tova, that's the traditional greeting for Yom Kippur. Can be a little tricky to say, a little bit of a tongue twister. Gemar Chatzimah Tova means may you complete a good inscription and sealing in the book of life for this new year. The shortened version is Gemar Tov, a little easier to say, so I wish you all a Gemar Tov as well. Now, just a reminder, especially for those of you who were not with us for Rosh Hashanah, that since our crowd is a little different, it's a little bigger than it typically is on a Friday night, I do want to just make a quick review and overview of some important information. That if at any point during our service, especially on Yom Kippur, if you see somebody who becomes ill or if you see anything out of the ordinary, please do notify one of our gabbis immediately. And our gabbis are Kevin Fox and Laura Ronan. They're both waving right now. Kevin is not waving, but in the unlikely event of an emergency, there are many exits from the building. You can, of course, find the ones at the back of the sanctuary. There are ones out to this side as well as out the kitchen. You can find exits as well at the end of both wings, the education wing and the office wing. We do ask that you please not prop open the doors at any time. If you're uncomfortable with the temperature in the room, just again, let our gabbis know and they will try to strike a balance that is comfortable for everybody, because inevitably someone's too hot and at the exact same time someone's too cold. So we'll do our best. We are very, very thankful for all the ways in which you've been patient and understanding with the different security measures we've put in place this year that are different from other years. And we just are thankful that you understand why we want so desperately and carefully to keep everybody safe. So with everything in place, let's all take a nice deep breath. Allow ourselves to now refine that sanctity that Jim Gutman helped us to start our service with, of course accompanied by our wonderful Meg Gister. Take one moment to ensure that your cell phones are off or silenced. And take a moment to greet the people near you and wish them a good Yontif as well. Nidre, the start of Yom Kippur, is a night like none other. It is called Shabbat Shabbaton, the Shabbat of Shabbats. Imagine an evening that special, that it is the Shabbat of Shabbats. It's the only night all year that we are encouraged to wear a talit. And so for those of you who are wearing one, or those of you who would still like to go and take one from the rack if there are any that remain, we do encourage you to choose, if you wish, to wear a talit tonight. And I always find that the embrace of the talit feels like an embrace from the divine during this most challenging and yet meaningful of days. We're reminded of God's compassion as well as God's forgiveness as we continue the act of turning and returning that we began 10 days ago. I invite you now, hopefully everyone has a machzor, a silver prayer book for these holy days, and I invite you to turn to page 5. Praying is more than merely reciting words. It's about encountering aspects of ourselves we rarely, if ever, see. Shifting our perspective and seeing all things anew. Awakening our spirits and sense of wonder. Prayer is about connection with ourselves, with a community of other seekers, and with someone or something beyond ourselves. On the High Holy Days in particular, our prayer has some additional goals. We're trying to remove our protective armor, ego, self-deception, rationalization, external and internal makeup, posturing, anything that keeps us from seeing ourselves as we really are. We're trying to experience both our vulnerability and the true source of our strength. And perhaps most importantly, we're trying to get past our self-judgment and locate a place of gentleness and tenderness, that place where we feel deeply loved and valued, and where we feel most loving of others, even if just for a moment. Page 9. And to now help us light our festival candles, it is a pleasure to invite 3 generations of the Kippur family, Donald and Joy, Amy and Evan, and Joshua and Molly. Please join us. On pages 10 and 11 in your Machzor, you'll find a handful of meditations on the act of fasting and self-denial, which stand as really the centerpiece for how we observe Yom Kippur, in addition to prayer and self-reflection. And I do want to, of course, remind you that for those of you who are choosing to fast, that you pay attention to your body's signals, and if at any time you don't feel well, please note that. And don't continue if you're not feeling well. If there's medication you need to take, please do take that. And if you need to eat with your medication, please do that as well. If for any reason it is unhealthy for you to be fasting, please do not feel pressured to. In fact, we are commanded not to fast if there is some health-related reason, including pregnancy or breastfeeding, etc., that we should not fast. So I hope you're making the decision that is best for you. And for those of you who are fasting, rather than wishing you an easy fast, a tzom kal, I instead wish you a meaningful fast. So now I invite you to take a look at these meditations on pages 10 and 11. Choose one that speaks to you and take a moment to pray silently. And now we will continue on page 14 as we approach the recitation, the singing of Kol Nidre. I would like to invite our rabbis, Laura Roman and Kevin Fox, to help us open the Ark. And tonight, holding the Torahs for us for the 3 recitations of Kol Nidre, it is a true pleasure to invite members of our team leadership in our congregation, as well as their parents, who I'm sure are quelling over them tonight. Tonight we have with us Zach Infeld, we have Katie Burzin, Jack Conley, Sarah Conley, Morgan Corpuel, and all of their wonderful parents. Again, page 14, please rise. Yom Kippur, the Jewish people's festival of the soul. And Kol Nidre, its sacred portal, a night of deep emotions, a night, as the psalmist wrote, to rejoice with trembling. We rejoice at the sound of Kol Nidre, rhythmic words of release from vows, oaths, and promises to God we fail to keep. We tremble at the melody, music of spiritual amazement. It fills us with awe as we stand before God and Torah. We rejoice that we stand together, strengthened by community in this hour of shared weakness and humility. We tremble, for tonight we confess our flaws, admit our imperfection, and acknowledge a power far beyond our understanding. We rejoice that we commit ourselves to great endeavors because we feel so deeply and think so nobly. We tremble, for we find that our ideals are far greater than our ability, and our promises surpass our might. We rejoice in the freedom that is Kol Nidre's true gift, the freedom to begin a new year without fear of failure, to aspire to be God's image in the world. We tremble because we are mortal. We rejoice in our gratitude for life. We rejoice with trembling and enter Kol Nidre to face our humanity.
Will he say
turn to page 18 for the traditional 3 repetitions of Kol Nidre. We will be standing for a lengthy amount of time, and so please do be seated if at any point it becomes necessary. We will hear the prayer sung 3 times, which differs from years past. We will all be invited to join in the singing on the 3rd rendition. declaration. All vows, resolves, and commitments, vows of abstinence and terms of obligation, sworn promises and oaths of dedication, that we promise and swear to God and take upon ourselves from this day of atonement until next day of atonement. May it find us well. We regret them, and for all of them we repent. Let all of them be discarded and forgiven, abolished and undone. They are not valid and they are not binding. Our vows shall not be vows, our resolves shall not be resolves, and our oaths they shall not be oaths. All shall be forgiven, the entire community of Israel and the stranger who lives in their midst, for all have gone astray in error. Moses prayed to God, as you have been faithful to this people ever since Egypt, please forgive their failings now, in keeping with your boundless love.
Vayomer Adonai salachti ki barecha. Vayomer Adonai salachti ki barecha. Vayomer Adonai salachti ki barecha.
And God responded, I forgive as you have asked. We remain standing and turn to page 22. Page 25. Day and night are yours, creative spirit of the universe. The muted colors of twilight, the radiance of dawn. Yours are the spreading wings of light, the deepening shadows of darkness, and ever-changing drama. In the human heart, too, the struggle between darkness and light unfolds. From sunlit heights of generosity the human heart sinks to the gloomy depths of selfishness. Although we fall, you give us the strength to rise again. You call on those who hurt through word or deed to break free from wrongdoing and return to you. All who hear your call to goodness are embraced. All who reject emptiness and evil find acceptance from you. We come into your presence this night of Kol Nidre, aware that our shortcomings and weaknesses are many. Yet, encouraged by your promise of forgiveness, we choose freely the path of repentance, restoring wholeness to our lives and holiness to the world. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'ma'ariv Aravi, blessed are you, Adonai, creator of twilight and dusk.
Thank you.
page 39. We read together. Our sages taught it is proper to mention the exodus from Egypt in our morning prayers and also at night. We celebrate the going out from Egypt in the morning light, full of confidence and vigor as we enter the new day. But in the evening, weary from the day's exertions, cast down and fearful at the coming of the night, what can the exodus teach us then? Our nighttime prayer brings hope and trust in the future. As God did not abandon our people long ago through the long, dark night of exile, so the Holy One will be with us in time to come. To stand by the one you love, that is the true essence of faithfulness, the meaning of emunah. So it is written in the Psalms to proclaim your kindness in the morning and your faithfulness in the nights. Sing with joy in the mornings of your life, when light surrounds you and the world seems beautiful and good. And in the evenings of your life, when you dwell in sorrow and the world seems dark, do not despair.
Thank you.
page 45. כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם, מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני תטהרו. For on this day atonement shall be made for you to purify you from all your wrongs, and pure you shall be in the presence of Adonai. For the Chatzi Kaddish, all who are able, please rise.
Yeah.
And so, in your holiness, give all creation the gift of awe. Turn our fear to reverence. Let us be witnesses of wonder, perceiving all nature as a prayer come alive. We bow to the sovereignty of your strength, the primacy of your power. We yearn for connection with all that lives, doing your will with wholeness of heart. Awe-inspiring is your creation, all-encompassing your transcendent name. And so, in your holiness, give your people the gift of honor. Bless with praise those who praise you. Bless with hope those who seek you. Give your believers a basis for faith, true happiness for the land of Israel, true joy in Jerusalem. May the sparks of David, your servant, soon grow bright enough for us to see a beam of light in the darkness, a promise of perfection. And so, in your holiness, give the righteous the gift of a vision bright with joy, a world where evil has no voice, and the rule of malevolence fades like wisps of smoke. Good people everywhere will celebrate the stunning sight of arrogance gone from the earth. You and you alone, Adonai, will reign over creation upon Mount Zion, home of your presence, and in Jerusalem, a city set apart by you. As the psalmist believed, Adonai will reign eternally, your God, Zion, for all generations. Hallelujah.
Kadosh ata v'norah shemecha, yein Eloah milvadecha, katuv vayiban Adonai tzvaot b'mishpat, v'ha'el hakadol מקודש בצדיקה, ברוך אתה אדוני, המלך, המלך הקדוש.
We now continue praying silently through page 81. You may choose, of course, to pray in English, Hebrew, or the prayers of your own hearts and souls, and you may be seated when you have completed your prayers. We will now be turning together to page 82 for the section of our service known as the Vidui, the confession. Interestingly enough, much of this section is written in the plural. We're confessing to sins as a group. We're admitting to transgressions as a whole. And that's always puzzling for some of why am I saying I did this, I did that, if I didn't actually? Why do we say all of these things as plurals? And one of the explanations is something that I invite you to ponder, which is that even if we are not the ones committing these wrongs, do we have some responsibility when we see others committing these wrongs? What is our responsibility for one another? So on page 82, we will be rising in just a moment for Tava Lefanecha, and it's an honor and pleasure to invite Sean and Lisa Connolly up to open the ark. Please rise.
Eloheinu
Please be seated. And now we come to the familiar prayer Ashamnu, where it is traditional to place your fist over your heart and to beat your heart, to hit your heart once for each sin that we list. And interestingly enough, Ashamnu is an acrostic, meaning there's a word here, a sin listed for every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet. On one hand, that's meant to represent a totality, that we can come up with at least one for every single Hebrew letter. In fact, there's 3 for the final letter, Tav. But on the other hand, it also means there is an end to the list, and that we don't have to beat ourselves up over every single little thing we do. And it's okay sometimes for the list to come to an end. But I do invite you, if it is meaningful to you, to place your fist over your heart and maybe wake your heart up a little bit. Encourage it in this new year 5780 to be more present in your life, in your own life, and in the ways in which you respond to others in your world. Hashem.
Ay, 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 ay,
ועשה שקטנו לבניך בדיבור,
The ways we have wronged you deliberately and by mistake, and harm we have caused in your world through the words of our mouths.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך באימוץ הלב, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בטיפשות פה.
The ways we have wronged you by hardening our hearts, and harm we have caused in your world through careless speech.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בכחשת חז"ל, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך ברכילות.
The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בקלילות, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בזלזול חודרים ומורים.
The ways we have wronged you by judging others unfairly, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בבדידות, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בהונאה ורע.
The ways we have wronged you through insincere apologies, and harm we have caused in your world by mistreating a friend or neighbor.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בחוזק יד, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך במשא ומתן.
The ways we have wronged you through violence and abuse, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by losing self-control.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בגילוי עריות, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך במאכל ובמשתה.
The ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך ביצר הרע, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך במשך ובמרבית.
The ways we have wronged you by giving in to our hostile impulses, and harm we have caused in your world through greed and exploitation.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך ברצון, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בנטיית גרון.
The ways we have wronged you through cynicism and scorn, and harm we have caused in your world through arrogant behavior.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בשנאת חינם, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בטומאת שפתיים.
The ways we have wronged you by hating without cause, and harm we have caused in your world through offensive speech.
אחרי שחטאנו לפניך בלשון הרע, ואחרי שחטאנו לפניך בצרות עין.
The ways we have wronged you with a slanderous tongue, and harm we have caused in your world through a selfish or petty spirit.
Selah
Page 100. We read together. God of forgiveness, we come before you in need of compassion. At Sinai you spoke words that guide our lives to this day, but our ancestors lost faith in you, lost hope in their Redeemer. With one voice they had promised, we will do and obey, and yet stiff-necked they broke their word, adoring an idol of gold. How wondrous your compassion in the face of their rebellion, your forgiveness in that moment of human weakness and doubt. We too have broken promises to you. We too worship the work of our own hands. We too make of gold a god. We too forsake your word. At Sinai you revealed 13 attributes of mercy. These aspects of your nature, your very essence, we now recall. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving and true, showing mercy to the thousandth generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. I never thought I would have to give this sermon. In my 15 years in the rabbinate and the 20 years since I entered seminary, I naively thought that anti-Semitism was a done deal. A thing of the past. Something to discuss historically, but never in the present tense. Yes, we knew that there were still minor incidents here and there, and that polite anti-Semitism remained in certain circles, but it was assumed that the world, and especially the United States of America, would never allow anti-Semitism to surface anywhere near the mainstream. And we never expected to have to face so much violence perpetrated against Jews just for being Jews. I am so sad that I was so wrong. As Rabbi Rachel Timoner writes, if we just sat here, all of us, and cried together today, that might be the most eloquent response to the year we've just lived through. I grew up in Skokie, Illinois. It was one of those places where you were Jewish just by living there, even if you weren't actually. All my friends said oi like it was nothing. My public high school was 75% Jewish. You could study French or Spanish or German as your foreign language, and you could also study 4 full years of Hebrew, which naturally I did, and which would have been completely irrelevant to my life had I not become a rabbi. In Skokie, it was so very easy to be Jewish. We had all the Jewish holidays off of school. Most of my teachers were Jewish. Most of the restaurants served matzah baskets on your table during Passover. Judaism was just in the air. I often refer to it as having grown up in a Jewish bubble. Now, the strange paradox of Skokie was its history, particularly an event which took place right around the time I was born. The village of Skokie most likely conjures up images of neo-Nazis wanting to march in full view of as many Jews as possible. You may even recall seeing a movie entitled Skokie, which starred Danny Kaye and Carl Reiner. Now, by the mid-1970s, out of a total population of 70,000, Skokie had a rapidly growing Jewish community, which a man named Marvin Bailey, the village's director of housing development, estimated at approximately 40,000 of that 70,000 people. A significant amount of Skokie's Jews, between 5,000 and 6,000 people, were refugees and survivors of the Holocaust and their families. So in 1977, a planned march by a small neo-Nazi group called the National Socialists began with the Chicago Tribune dubbed the Skokie Swastika War. Skokie was deliberately chosen in order to be as hurtful and as traumatizing as possible, while also garnering as much publicity and news coverage as possible. Shortly thereafter, the swastika and the march itself became the centerpiece of a constitutional question posed by this otherwise minor and unknown group. They encountered immense pushback from Skokie's wonderful mayor, Al Smith, the village's board of trustees, and the village prosecutors, Harvey Schwartz and Richard Salzman, over their plans to march through Skokie while carrying flags bearing the swastika. As a result, their leader, Frank Collin, who ironically enough, his name had originally been Cohen, invoked the First Amendment as his group's defense. Even today, law school courses on constitutional law highlight the Skokie story as a prime example of a complex First Amendment case study. The court battles over whether or not the National Socialists could march in Skokie dragged on for 2 years. Was it free speech? Was it hate speech? Was it protected? In the meantime, over those 2 years, the community itself had the time to organize and to plan their responses. Soon after the march was planned, a large group of local clergy, Protestant ministers, Catholic priests, and so many rabbis gathered on a local high school football field, and they publicly announced as one group that all of the faith communities in town would stand in solidarity with the Jewish community no matter what happened. I recently reached out to a group of folks on Facebook who lived in Skokie during that time, and I asked for their recollections. I got over 100 responses. Individual responses, of course, varied. How could this be happening in America? Many survivors wondered. These aren't real Nazis, others claimed. I've seen real Nazis. Some cautioned that there was sure to be a riot, and so you should lock your doors and pull your shades and hide. Others, especially amongst those who were survivors, promised to counter protest with guns, with baseball bats, and with fists. In a January 1978 letter to the Chicago Tribune, months into the court battle over the group's right to march, Collin explained, "By forcing the free speech for National Socialism issue in Skokie, we are fighting for our basic rights everywhere." And as you may know, the ACLU agreed and defended them. The U.S. Supreme Court ultimately ruled that Collin's right of free speech extended to Skokie. The fight had gone on for so long, but it was clear how many people would show up in counter-protest. So Colin called it off just a few days before the planned march. Marches eventually happened elsewhere in the Chicagoland area with little fanfare, including one in Marquette Park, which sadly had a history of violent, racist demonstrations, including one in which Martin Luther King Jr. was injured. Now, I thought I knew everything about Skokie's history with the Nazis, having grown up in its midst. But my research turned up a part of the story which I don't believe we were ever taught, and which seems especially important now in 2019. A fascinating record of the debate over the strategies to confront the Nazis comes from a forgotten source, the Chutzpah Jewish Liberation Collective. That's a great name. And their underground newspaper called Chutzpah. Founded in 1971, this small, charismatic group demonstrated together, and they published a newspaper articulating a holistic vision of Jewish liberation. The Chutzpah Collective had used the weeks of uncertainty leading up to the would-be Nazi demonstration in Skokie to form a coalition. Chutzpah wanted people who were threatened by Nazis to unite in opposition, namely blacks, gays, socialists, and Jews. They were joined by the Tim Berry Irish Republican clubs, the International Socialists, and the North Side chapter of the New American Movement, among many others. And once this full group was formed, they chose to name their alliance the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising Coalition. Your typical Skokie resident remembers not merely the First Amendment battle, but also how much it meant to see the entire community come together in these ways. There's so much for us to learn from the Skokie swastika wars of the late 70s. Then, as now, we believed that anti-Semitism, otherwise known unfortunately as the oldest hatred, was for all intents and purposes over. In the introduction to her newest book, Anti-Semitism Here and Now, historian Deborah Lipstadt points out that she was surprised by the difficulty in writing the book. She's a prolific writer, and she's considered one of the Holocaust's leading experts and historians. But for her, there was something different about writing this book. She wrote, "As horrific as the Holocaust was, it is firmly in the past. When I write about it, I'm writing about what was. Though I remain horrified by what happened, it is history. Contemporary anti-Semitism is not. It is about the..." Lipstadt insightfully examines the state of anti-Semitism right now. While she says that noting an uptick in the amount, the number of anti-Semitic attacks is important for empirical purposes, the numbers alone should not be what drives our concern. She explains what should alarm us is that human beings continue to believe in a conspiracy that demonizes the Jews and sees them as evil. It is a world view, a conspiracy theory. Plus, she reminds us, it is axiomatic that if Jews are being targeted with hateful rhetoric and prejudice, other minorities should not feel immune. This is not likely to end with these groups either. Anti-Semitism flourishes in a society that is intolerant of others, be they immigrants or racial or religious minorities. The existence of Jew hatred within a society is an indication that something about the entire society is amiss. No healthy society harbors extensive anti-Semitism or any other form of hatred. To help us understand how society is amiss under these circumstances, we need, of course, to be able to define and identify the different kinds of anti-Semites we may encounter. Lipstadt suggests the following taxonomy of the anti-Semite. Number one, the extremist. They hold ideologies that include a fundamental belief that America is meant exclusively for white Christians. A number of crimes have showcased this belief, including one in 2017, which took place on a streetcar in Portland, Oregon. A white supremacist began verbally assaulting two female passengers, one who was black and one who was wearing a hijab. When two men came to the young women's defense, the assailants slashed their throats. At his arraignment, he declared, "You call it terrorism, I call it patriotism." Note, of course, a major difference between today's extremists and those of World War II, or even the Skokie marches. They've changed their packaging. They've decided to project a decidedly normal image, clean cut, well-dressed, no swastikas or Nazi regalia. They hope to go mainstream and to normalize their beliefs in a way never before achieved. Group number 2, the anti-Semitic enablers. These people fall into two categories. Those who hate Jews for utilitarian purposes, especially for political reasons, and those whose general ideology has nothing to do with Jews specifically, but Jews get kind of caught up in it. Both categories enable anti-Semitism to make its way into the mainstream, and both are prevalent on the left and on the right. Both sides of the aisle here in America have a problem with anti-Semitic enablers. From the right, we have frequent suggestions, comments, and retweets of active white nationalists and white supremacists, including way too many dog whistles which contain old stereotypes about Jews and money, world domination, or a secret cabal of those running the world. There's an inability on the right to condemn blatant anti-Semitic acts and comments, including the events in Charlottesville. Jewish members of the government are often singled out as evil or corrupt. And of course, George Soros is secretly funding it all. On the left, there are at least two manifestations of anti-Semitic enablers. First, you have those like England's Jeremy Corbyn, member of the labor and trade union movement since the earliest chapters of his career. He has an automatic sympathy for whomever appears to be the underdog or the oppressed. To him, anyone assumed to be white, wealthy, or associated with a group that seems to be privileged cannot, by definition, be a victim. Most problematically are those with whom he has associated. Corbyn has publicly supported and defended figures who accuse Jews and or Israelis of orchestrating 9/11, and those who perpetuate the ancient blood libel accusation of Jews using Christian children's blood to make matzah. We also have similar figures on the left in the US, like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, whose accusations against Israel's treatment of Palestinians seem to end up encompassing all Jews. And meaningful arguments for intersectionality often seem to leave the Jews excluded as a valid category. You and I might understand or argue that anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism are not exactly the same thing, but to much of the world, I think there's very little distinction between the two. Israelis are Jews, and Jews therefore are responsible for any of the perceived crimes committed against the Palestinians. For many, no matter how we try to rationally explain the difference, the words Jew and Zionist are interchangeable. These enablers, on the right and on the left, are problematic for all of us, no matter where we personally fall on the political spectrum. We must call out anti-Semitism wherever it originates, not just on the other side. By only focusing on the anti-Semites in one party or the other, even if they function differently, we only further divide the Jewish community at a time when we need to be uniting and working together. What makes this increasingly complicated is that these political figures are not violent extremists. And they probably wouldn't even consider themselves to be anti-Semites. But engaging with and enabling extremist anti-Semites is itself an anti-Semitic act, that causes just as much damage by giving those dangerous voices legitimacy. And though we may support other parts of their platforms or other aspects of their ideologies, they all should be called out for their enabling rhetoric by the entire Jewish community. As anti-Semitism becomes more and more acceptable in the public discourse, remaining silent is not an option. Group number 3, the dinner party anti-Semite. Lipstadt describes the dinner party anti-Semite as a polite anti-Semite. He's got Jewish business associates, was horrified by Charlottesville, and has donated to the local Holocaust Museum. But when the town council is considering a zoning variance to allow for the construction of another synagogue in the neighborhood, this fellow is the head of the opposition. It'll change the feeling of the neighborhood. He'll mention that he's hired a new associate, casually mention that she's a Jew, but assure those listening that she's not a typical Jew. Our area of New England is notorious for this kind of polite anti-Semitism, as highlighted in the Gregory Peck film Gentleman's Agreement. And personally, just last week, I overheard a conversation between two women. One of whom was explaining that her niece had just converted to Judaism. Well, the woman said to her friend, she worked for a Jewish lawyer, and when she saw how much there was, she wanted to be Jewish too. Group number 4, the clueless anti-Semite. We wish that the actions of the clueless anti-Semite were harmless. They really don't seem to know that their words are hurtful or discriminatory. You might recall reading just in mid-September that a New Jersey councilwoman came under fire for saying, quote, her city's assistant attorney was able to get less out of a personal injury claim against the city because they were able to wait her out and Jew her down. Trenton City Council President Kathy McBride reportedly used this term during a closed-door session, and when confronted with it, she claimed it was not at all a hateful term. Rather, it's just a term for negotiating. Hence, a clueless anti-Semite. So what to do about all of this? What to do about the rise in violence, in anti-Semitism, in vandalism, and even in mass shootings and murders of Jews? What to do about the mainstream acceptability of more and more anti-Semitic statements and beliefs? What to do about these different kinds of anti-Semites we might encounter in our daily lives? We can't line the streets with baseball bats and weapons or signs. Not when the anti-Semitism is so insidious and pernicious. There isn't one specific group we can fight or protest. It feels like it's coming at us from all sides. Both Deborah Lipstadt and Barry Weiss, whose book How to Fight Anti-Semitism also has much to teach us in this moment, highlight that we cannot address anti-Semitism with logic or with rationality, as much as we may try. Weiss suggests that protests and marches against anti-Semitism have a fundamental flaw. They are reactive and defensive. She quotes from an essay written by a man named Zev Magen, who said, quote, a man calls you a pig. Do you walk around with a sign explaining that, in fact, you are not a pig? Do you hand out leaflets expostulating in detail the manifold differences between you and a pig? It's not going to change anything. Instead, Weiss suggests that we reclaim our Jewish pride and empowerment. First, she encourages us to think about why we want to fight back and what we are fighting for. As we all know, there has not been a single moment in Jewish history in which there weren't anti-Semites, determined to eradicate Judaism and the Jews. But as Weiss explains, Judaism did not sustain their magnificent civilization because they were anti-Semites. They sustained it because they knew who they were and why they were. They were lit up not by fires from without, but from fires within. Embracing the fires within us is in line with the anti-Semitism conversations that we ourselves hear took part in at CBSRZ earlier this year, inspired, of course, by the need to process our response to the Pittsburgh murders. The 2 sessions we held focused on, first, why we must act in these situations to eradicate injustice against us and others. And in the second, we highlighted what we ourselves love about Judaism and what action steps we can take right now. There were so many reasons that our attendees felt proud to be Jewish, and to share just a few of them: Judaism's inherent empathy, the encouragement by our tradition to ask why, the joy of a Passover Seder, our history and our heritage, and our wide variety of traditions and customs. And I hope that each one of you will take time to think about your own reasons for being a proud part of the Jewish community. Somewhat surprisingly, Lipstat's book has been widely celebrated, while Weiss's book has had more mixed reviews. Their books are quite similar, actually, both in content and in conclusions. They also both call out anti-Semitism across the political spectrum. They differ most in tone and length, which seems perhaps to be why Weiss's book wasn't taken as seriously in many reviews. But one reviewer hoped that How to Fight Anti-Semitism would, quote, jolt mainstream Jews out of a soggy complacency. What I happen to most appreciate in Weiss's book are some of her own action suggestions on how to fight anti-Semitism in this very moment. 1, trust your discomfort. Your eyes and your ears are not lying, so trust yourself when you feel that something is anti-Semitic. We know it when we see it. 2, call it out, especially when it's hard. As Weiss explains, 2 things can be true at once. Ilhan Omar can espouse bigoted ideas about Jews, and she herself can be the target unfairly of bigots and hatred. Both can be true at the same time. Instead, Weiss reminds us to criticize ideas and not people. This is obvious. And to express our outrage even when it's inconvenient. She says, since when is being a fun guest at a dinner party more important than standing up for what matters? 3, apply the Kippur or Magen David test. Weiss asks us if we feel comfortable walking around our own neighborhoods or communities in a kippah or with a visible Magen David. Can we safely assert our Jewishness where we live? 4, don't trust people who seek to divide Jews even if they are Jews. This seems really critical. We cannot allow ourselves to be separated into good Jews and bad Jews, no matter what criteria is being used or by whom. Reform versus Orthodox, Republican versus Democrat, assimilated versus Hasid. Resist the temptation of demonizing other Jews and remember that we are all ultimately part of Klal Yisrael, the community and family of Israel. 5, allow for the possibility of change. At a time of year when we're all focused on repentance and personal growth, we have to kind of acknowledge that others are capable of changing and growth too. People who used to be vocal anti-Semites may change into our supporters. People who used to actively antagonize the Jewish community might have repented and might actually now be our allies. The lessons of Skokie remind us that alliances and coalitions and fellowship are what ultimately defeat hatred and fear. 6, notice your enemies, but even more importantly, notice your friends. Celebrate the folks who reach out to support the Jewish community, and look for opportunities to be that voice for other communities experiencing oppression. Who is CBSRZ's Chutzpah collective today, here in the Connecticut River Valley? We were all so moved by the outpouring of love that CBSRZ experienced in the days and weeks immediately following the Pittsburgh attack. We're blessed to have so many wonderful neighbors of many different faith traditions who were and are here for us and who want to continue to be here for us. We should do all we can to continue to fortify these relationships and support them as much as they support us. And 7, nurture your own Jewish identity. As I mentioned earlier, think about what and why Judaism matters to you. What makes CBSRZ important to you and your family, and how you can continue to strengthen your own connection with the Jewish people. The more grounded we are in our own Jewishness, and maybe even the prouder we are, I truly believe the less we will feel afraid. Anti-Semitism isn't going to go away. It hasn't yet. And Jews are too easy to use as a scapegoat anytime something goes wrong in the society. But Judaism isn't going to go away either. Let's enjoy every moment of being Jewish and celebrate all the teachings and traditions which are loving and life-affirming, based on the wisdom of ancient sacred texts as well as wise sages of today. One God, the inherent dignity and holiness of every human being, justice and righteousness for all, the focus on making the world a better place right here and right now. Nothing can take these powerful messages away from us, and nothing can stop us from spreading these messages like rays of light around the world. I pray that we all find friends and allies, relationships and experiences with Jew and non-Jew alike, which remind us that this is a good world that we live in. And I pray that the great tide of righteousness will soon sweep away coarse sands of hatred, dehumanization, and division. The words of Sarah Stock Mayo, resident of Pittsburgh, conclude my thoughts this evening in a poem entitled Rosh Hashanah 5780, dedicated to the victims and survivors of Tree of Life, or L'Simcha, Dor Chadash, and New Light Congregations with Love. It felt good to stand in synagogue today, to stand in synagogue in Pittsburgh today, to loudly declare our Jewishness today, to blow the shofar today, a reminder to everyone, wake up. What are you waking up to this year? How are you showing up this year? In whose name do you speak up? Upon whose shoulders do you stand? It was hard to stand in synagogue today, and not just because of my aching back. It was hard to stand in synagogue in Pittsburgh today, knowing that 11 souls who should be praying in their sacred spaces were missing from their usual seats. We're not there to blow the shofar, or to chant Haftarah, or to hold the door for other worshipers, or pass out prayer books, or even to eat their brisket, dip apples and honey for a sweet new year. It was hard to stand in synagogue in Pittsburgh today, knowing all of the goodness that was lost, the voices silenced for no other reason except that they were Jewish. When we tell of our history in years to come, what will the story we weave? What will be the story we weave into the familiar, annually repeated tales of our ancestors? What will the next generation say about where we stood in 5780, almost 1 year after communal carnage? Will they know the whispered promises we made to God? Will they know the ways in which we work to change what has already begun and write a different chapter of an ancient yet relevant book? It felt good to stand in synagogue today, to stand in synagogue in Pittsburgh today, to loudly declare our Jewishness today, to reclaim what is ours, to take hold of the heavenly pen of the book of life and write the word yes. Can you hear that song? May this be God's will. Amen. gave my microphone a little break. We will now turn back in our Machzorim to our concluding prayers, which begins with Avinu Malkeinu on page 112. Page 112, and it is an honor to invite up Emma and Bianca Gonzalez-Lesser to help us open the ark. Page 112, please rise. We read together, Avinu Malkeinu, illumine for us the path of our life. Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we find the strength to take the road less traveled by? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we come to know the purpose of our existence? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we learn not to live life in vain? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we get out of our indifference? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we distinguish between truth and falsehood? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we find the answers to our questions? Avinu Malkeinu, how shall we gird ourselves with strength to seek answers? Avinu Malkeinu, be gracious to us, answer us, empower us, and give us courage, for the answers are both in you and with you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Koleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chatan lefanecha. Avinu Malkeinu, Chamon aleinu. Bi'alon aleinu, B'ta'apeinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Ha'leteve, B'chesed v'ra'ah, Be'aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Ha'alei kohatai, U'mastin, Me'achleinu. Aleinu leshabeach l'adon hakol, l'teiknu al Yotzer Bereshit, shelo asanu kivei haratzot, velo samanu lemishpachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kachem, ve'or aleinu kechol amonam, v'anachnu korim, u'nishachavim u'modim, lifnei melech, malkei hamalchim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Please be seated.
She'unotzer shamayim v'yotzer haaretz, u'moshe v'karol v'shamayim hima'al, v'shchinatu tov, v'shchinatu tov, v'gomei meromi, u'Eloheinu Elyon, emet malkeinu emet suhato, kakatu b'torato, yadata yom v'hashevota el levavecha, ki Adonai hu Elohim, v'shamayim mima'al, v'al haaretz mitachat Eino.
And now I invite up for a few words and announcements our congregation's president, Brad Jr.
Good Cantor, everybody.
Again,
I just want to remind you to bring your bags, non-perishable food items tomorrow for our drop-off. A truck will be on hand. In fact, I think I saw the truck out there tonight. And it'll be on hand before and after all services tomorrow for collection and delivery to the Shoreline Soup Kitchen and pantries, so you may put your bags directly in the truck. You can still even pick up a colorful, reusable bag, I believe. I saw some by the entrance. All the food in that truck will be given to those who don't have a choice and often are hungry without choosing to be. Once again, I certainly want to thank the scores of volunteers who work with our clergy and staff in making our high holiday services so beautiful and special. Our choir, Cantor, our Rabbi, thank you. Young Kippur services begin tomorrow morning, promptly at 9:30. Once again, try to arrive a little early with another reminder to bring your high holiday ticket for each individual member attending. Children's services will begin at 2 p.m. At 3:30 tomorrow afternoon. Our afternoon service will promptly begin with Yitzchor and Mila, the concluding service to follow, followed by our congregation breakfast. Don't forget your ticket for entry and re-entry. And for our breakfast, please bring a dairy or vegetarian potluck dish to share as we step into the new year as a community. Helping to set up or to clean up afterwards will be very much appreciated. Thank you very much, and I wish you all an easy leaving this past.
Thank you.
We turn to page 121. This holy night concludes with memory. Our last thoughts always are of those we have lost. We miss them especially tonight, yearning for their presence at our side. The service we have shared once was theirs. They spoke and sang the ancient words. They prayed, repented, and yearned for better lives, as we have done. Flawed in their deeds, imperfect in their faith, they still drew strength from their tradition, as we seek fortitude in ours. What was good and beautiful in their lives once gave us joy, and now inspires us to reach higher. The knowledge that they loved us deeply brings comfort to our hearts. So we light candles of remembrance and gratitude, and we speak this timeless truth, Zichronam Livracha. Their memory is a blessing now and forever. We pray that their goodness will live on in our lives, planting seeds of kindness and hope for generations to come. If you are currently observing a Shiva or Shoshim or Yortzeit of a family member or friend and would like to share a name out loud or think of them in your hearts, you're invited to do so.
Francis Mose.
Dr. Michael Rock.
David Frank.
Jeanette Black.
Nathan Holmes, Shelburne. Shelburne,
Rusty Helmy.
Theodore Kaminsky.
Howard Coleman, President.
Ed Romero.
Diane Doyle.
Andrew Zilker.
Don Green.
Gary Perry.
Robert Barker.
Harvey Oberman.
We pray that all of their memories will be a blessing for all who knew and loved them. Together now we turn to page 122, and we join in the words of Kadisha Tone. Please rise. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, v'yalmad yirach yirtei v'yamlich machutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei t'chol beit Yisrael, v'agalah v'zman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shemei Rabba v'varach v'yolamu amei almaya, v'yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei v'yishad b'richu, Le'ela u'le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata, tishbechata v'nechemata, ta'miran v'yalma v'yimru amen. Yehei shalom rabba v'yishemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yakol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'namav, u'yaseh shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael, v'yakol yoshvei tevel v'yimru amen. Shalom b'romav, u'yaseh shalom, aleinu v'yakol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. We conclude on page 127. Our God, God of our ancestors, eternal God of all generations, may your presence in our lives this new year renew our spirits and renew our strength. May it be a good year. May it be a sweet year. L'shana tova tikatevu v'techatemu. May you be inscribed and sealed for a good year.
She was ready to jump right in. It was like I said, Doreen, I kind of got. She said, "But we just meet for half an hour." I said, "Can I wait till you come back from your trip?" I said, "I told Andrea I couldn't start it until next week, but she left today, so we'll be in touch." But I feel better. No. There's no weekends here. Yeah, it's okay. No. I was glad. It would have been terrible if she said, "What are you kidding?" I was glad. It was just like, wait, I told everyone I couldn't fit any more things in this week, so it'll be fun.
What happened to my kid?
He can't eat cake, remember?
That was hilarious.
That was so funny. That would really be like if someone told me that.
There's another gardener, remember Erica wanted to contact somebody.
Because Henry didn't put the folders in the right place and it was very plain.
So she said, Kevin, and
I thought, Andrea said, like, well, those plants are mine. They're so huge. They'd be perfect, we don't discuss it. And then the other ones are kept. Like, I don't know everything about everyone. I mean, you could have a hobby I don't know about. And so I emailed Kevin, he said, I can't eat kale for medical reasons, but you can have as much as you want. I said, okay.
I just go around these
and I thought, I don't know about that. And then Andrea wrote me and said, oh, it's case you need the information from other Kevin. It's like, he would have played along for a pretty long time. I didn't call him at that point. I thought, at that point, Amy was sending me messages, step away from the kale. Because I just kept volunteering. I was like, oh, I have another idea. Here, let me knock myself out. So at that point, it was like,
Kale's pretty good. There's a lot of
well, honestly, we had to put together all this photo documentation.